All right, welcome to Servant Leadership Library, where we dive deep into the art of leading with empathy, purpose, and growth in mind. I'm your host, Nicholas Paluco, the CEO of One to One, and IT solutions provider for growing businesses. And today we're joined by the dynamic force of an entrepreneurial mindset herself, Amy Holtz. And Amy doesn't just build businesses, she ignites dreams and fuels ambition. A serial entrepreneurial and passionate advocate for pushing boundaries. Amy is on a mission to help others achieve far beyond what she ever imagined. With her expertise in guiding entrepreneurs and leadership teams, Amy is a certified EOS implementer and DIS facilitator, brings a wealth of knowledge to the table. So grab your favorite leadership book, settle in, get ready to be inspired by Amy's insight on achieving greatness through servant leadership. Welcome, Amy, and thank you for being with us today. Would you mind kind of introducing yourself to our visitors?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd be thrilled to introduce myself, but rather than give like the standard bio of my history, which, you could read on LinkedIn, I'm going to tell you what has driven my leadership journey because it so ties into servant leadership.
I love it.
I became religious much later in life. And what drove my entire I'm a religious Jew, and what drove my entire leadership journey was something about lighting the Hanukkah candles. In Judaism, a candle, a light represents a soul. And what we learn when we light the Hanukkah candles, when you take your light and you light another candle, it doesn't diminish your light at all, but you bring more light into the world. And that's driven what I believe my leadership journey is all about. I love that you use the word ignite. I don't know that I use that word in my LinkedIn, but that is what I'm about, igniting other people's souls and letting them shine because people have so much to give. So
I love that. I love that. That's amazing. So I think we were talking before we got started today. In my faith of Catholicism, we just last weekend talked about a similar thing, right? And in regards to that, it talks about like the Holy Spirit and like that light of like guiding and filling, right? And in our world, we end Easter, and now it's about like this true new beginning. I think that's wonderful. A great way to kind of start us off. I'm really excited to kind of hear how you kind of tie all this together. So no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to give you my view of, I think great leaders, first of all, make space for other people. So C.S. Lewis has a beautiful quote. It's all about humility. Like Moses was the greatest leader of all time, and he's also the most humble person of all time. And what they say about him is not, many people think humility, I'm not important or something like that. Humility is understanding your worth. And C.S. Lewis has this quote that I love. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less often. And
I like that.
I see, I love it too. And I see that the greatest leaders pull themselves back, listen carefully, give their people the opportunity to shine and grow. And it's hard.
It is hard.
It's really hard, especially for people who, like me or you, who've built businesses and think we know all the answers and probably have the answers, and we could do it faster if we just give everyone the answers. But great leaders build leaders. They light their candle and they make it brighter.
Oh, I love that. That is wonderful. And a lot of our listeners are coming from leadership in way different directions, right? Some are leaders now, some are trying to just even define what leadership is. Others are trying to go through the journey, right? And I think they say, what is their 5 levels of leadership, right? And they change all the time. So, from your perspective of someone trying to get into leadership today and utilizing the concept that you're saying, what would you have to say for them? I mean, did you just immediately one day show up and say, listen, I'm going to become a leader, right? What inspired you to kind of go on your journey and kind of feel the way that you're feeling?
Well, first of all, I just fell into it. I didn't realize it was happening. Like I didn't realize it was happening. I just fell into it. We had a family business, which was a chain of party stores.
Okay.
Ultimately, we became Party City's largest franchise. And I actually had trouble
Wow.
stepping into leadership. I could tell everybody what to do, but I had a lot of trouble saying, I am the boss. So I think that's like a female thing, which is a whole separate topic. But really, I think that leadership is, you don't have to be extraordinary. It's ordinary people taking responsibility. It's really taking responsibility. And I think it's about having a lot of uncommon courage, uncommon clarity, and uncommon caring. And it's really it's just taking responsibility. Most people don't want responsibility. And, it sometimes happens to you or you step up to do it, but you are a servant. Like I love servant leadership because it's not like, hey, I'm in charge, I'm so great. Really,
Right.
how am I making you better? How am I serving you?
I love that. And for you use the word in regards to kind of like you said ownership, right? Like you own it. Many people seem that are trying to understand like what is ownership, right? Like, well, what do you mean I own it? Like I'm not the boss. Like but they seem to struggle in the beginning as they learn like what is ownership and what is accountability, right? Like what am I accountable for, but what do I own? From your experience, you kind of were, it seems like, forged into it, right? You were pushed into kind of working through that. But for people that you work with on a daily basis, how do you explain to them the difference between like accountability and ownership when leading?
Well, let me step back for a second. Like, it's funny. When I first became an EOS implementer, I struggled a lot with accountability. So I was a fundraiser. I ran a nonprofit organization, and I had in my head I was going to raise $2 million. But if the CEO, the guy I was working with, said to me, Amy, you have to raise $1 million, I probably would have said I quit. Because even though I was going to raise 2 million and I did raise 2 million and it was like a stretch goal, the idea of someone saying to me, you are accountable for doing this, was very scary. So for me, I struggled with taking accountability for that. But what I have learned, which is also an EOS concept, okay, how are you getting to that $1 million a year? That's your scorecard. I'm going to call up 5 rich people a week. So when you break it down into smaller bites, it becomes easier. So accountability is taking responsibility, but I know for me, it was a scary thing. So I don't judge anybody who struggles with that.
And do you think that part of accountability is something that you were taught? Did you see someone else do it? Help us understand that a little bit.
I'm hyper responsible. I'm an overachiever, but I never want to let anybody down.
Okay.
And it was a pressure thing. I couldn't handle the pressure. I now understand that when you break it down, you could do it. Like one of my great experiences in life, now that I'm much older, is you could achieve way more than you ever thought possible. And it's shocking what you can accomplish if you have the tenacity and you follow, and you do the work. But it's not easy. It's not easy.
And that's well said, because it's not, right. Many people think that the journey, we always see this, this iceberg concept, right? Like, what's on the top of the iceberg is kind of success, and then all of the things underneath it, right? And many times people see the success part of where we're at and think that that's where they should be, right? For those that are kind of like below the iceberg right now, what advice would you give them as far as like getting into their journey, right? Like as you kind of say, hey, I was a little apprehensive, what drew you or what pushed you, into kind of moving through that?
So, first of all, I have a lot of tenacity, but I really believe you need to be living your life purpose. And it's really, what do you love to do and you're great at? It's that state of flow that they talk about in positive psychology. And I believe that when you're doing things you love to do and you're great at, and you're working in a field that you're passionate about, that's the game changer. but it takes time and it's a journey. Like, I don't think I understood that it was a journey. And I believe everything is a training program for what you want to do. So when I was at Party City, which was Party Supermarket, then we became Party City, I discovered I loved building a business. And then I started to become religious. And I jokingly used to say, I realized I spent my whole day trying to get people to buy things they didn't need. And then I joined a nonprofit media company, which is today Open Door Media. And what was I doing there? I was building a business, but I was in a field I loved and I was passionate about it. So when I was so passionate about it, it's like all the other stuff falls away. And a driving thing for me is don't let your insecurities get in the way of achieving what you want to achieve. That rule has served me well. So when I started working in this nonprofit media company, I said, there are two things I'm never doing. I'm never speaking in public, and I'm never fundraising. But then I realized if I wanted to do what I wanted to do, which was very ambitious, I had to do those two things. So I got training and I forced myself to do it. I had the tenacity to work through what I needed to do. So I think figure out did I
There we
say?
go. That's okay.
I don't know what happened.
You were saying figure out what to do.
Figure out what you love doing, what you're great at. Figure out where you want to go, what's your big goal, and then break it down into pieces, very much like the EOS Vision Traction Organizer. Where do you want to be in 10 years? Where do you want to be in 3 years? What are you going to do this year? What skills are you going to be? What are you going to accomplish? And then break it down into quarterly rocks. And then even those scorecard items of, I'm going to make 5 fundraising calls a week. I'm going to do this. And it takes time. Like my first year as a fundraiser, I don't think I raised a single dollar. But I want to share one other thing that I just shared with somebody else earlier today, which was such a profound moment for me. When I first started fundraising, they said to me, listen to all these tapes and be like this person. And I did, and I didn't raise a single dollar. Be you. The second I started being me in my leadership journey, as a fundraiser, that's when things started to happen. You have a unique purpose, you have a beautiful soul, and everyone else is taken. So be you, and that's when you're going to fly.
Oh, that is one. That's beautiful. And I have to ask, and if you don't want to answer, that's fine too. But tell us, like, what spurred your spiritual journey?
Pure luck. I didn't believe in God or anything like that. Wow. And I walked into a Torah class, and the person said, if you don't know where you're going, any path is going to get you there. And that's really what my life was. I was always responding to emergencies. A store got robbed. This person was quitting. This kid was sick. I never was proactive and said, what do I want my life to look like? And I was like, my life was happening to me. I wasn't planning my life. So I decided to change that. And then I still didn't believe in God, but I decided that it was better that my kids believe in God. So, because it was, if they were going through a hard time, if they could believe God was testing them. So then I said, I'm going to let them, believe in it. So, because I thought that was a good gift to give my kids. And then I started learning Torah, which is what Jews do, and discovered that I actually thought it was true. And that was kind of a bad day, because being a religious Jew comes with a lot of rules. So
wow, that's wonderful. What a beautiful thing though, right? Like, I mean, you talk about like leaning in a lot and just taking the tenacity. I mean, that takes a lot of tenacity to go from 0 to fully invested in that. So kudos to you. That I think you're teaching us over and over again to take the initiative to kind of lean in and to find what you love, right? Like regardless of what the result is.
But also be open to truth, because that wasn't what I loved. I came to the many people today don't live in the world of truth, and they don't take the time to research what's really true. So it took 10 years, but unfortunately I came to the conclusion that it's true. So it's a process, and you got to be open to truth, and which
I love it. I love it. That's amazing. Well, tell us a little bit about, you started talking about a little bit your like entrepreneurial journey, but I mean, I see that you have you have many ventures that you ventured into, a very strong education. Like what spurred you into entrepreneurship outside of just business or leading businesses and that type of thing? Like, can you give us a little flavor of kind of what that path looked like?
Yeah, it was a little bit of an accident. I was a banker because I didn't know what I wanted to do in college. So I majored in finance because that was a cool thing to do. I worked for a bank because it was the job to have. Hated that. Went to law school because I didn't know what to do. Practiced law for many years. Also hated that. So my father had this chain of 8 party stores. So I said, "Oh, Dad, I'll open a store." And that's where I discovered I loved building a business. It was just pure luck. But I loved figuring it out, solving the hard problems. How are we going to get to the next level? It was such a thrill. And we were struggling, though, because we were competing with Party City. So every time I opened a store, they opened across the street from me.
Oh, no.
Wasn't good. But then the best day of my life happened. They were really big. We weren't so big. We were like 25 stores, and they ran into financial trouble. So they came to us and they said, "You want to buy all our duplicate stores?" We ended up joining them. And then I was a big part of helping them grow. Sold like 10 years ago, but it was it was amazing. But I have to say, for those of you who are struggling, once we started to make money, when we were Party City and things were going great, I said to my brother one day, "It's a little boring." Even though before, when we were struggling and possibly on, going out of business, it was so hard. But it was in the struggle that was the joy.
Wow. That is so, but it seems like you came from an entrepreneurial family then too, right?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
My father was a great entrepreneur. He's credited with starting the party industry for sure.
Wow. We hear that a lot. We hear a lot of entrepreneurs are spurred by obviously other entrepreneurs. I think you said a technique a minute ago, like somebody gave you something and said, emulate this person, right? And you said, truly be yourself. But what a beautiful journey that probably was. A lot of lessons learned at dinner table. I know that happens frequently in my family. I think they have like a doctorate in business after they get done here in all the dinner stores.
Yeah, I hope my kids are listening. They're listening somewhere.
Well, is there any, that journey sounds amazing, right? But is there like a defining moment that kind of shaped your leadership, journey, or even specifically to kind of like servant leadership, right? Like you said it beautifully, like serving others, like we're here to, oh, I love it, to shine that light, right? To empower others. Was there like a defining moment that you could share?
It really was what I said at the beginning when I heard that story about the Hanukkah candles. I was like, that is what I'm here to do. And I just love helping people shine their light. And we get to do so much of that as EOS implementers on a different level. And so it's just a privilege. And I believe we're all here to serve and to help. And then another thing that really is meaningful to me, I see it all the time on leadership teams. Very often the leader is the big voice at the table and they're taking up all the air in the room. And I just want to say to them, please step back a little, take away a little bit of space. And there's a concept to Judaism, you probably have the same concept. When God created the world, he was everywhere. He had to constrict in order to make room for other people. It's called sinsum. And what I believe leaders need to do is the same thing. constrict, give them room to grow, and so then you don't have to do everything. And I know how hard it is, because usually as the leader, you have the answer, you know exactly what everybody needs to do, and you could do it 10 times faster than them. And it's just so long, they're going to get it wrong. But if you want to build a self-managing company, or you want to spend your time doing the things you should be doing, which is focusing on growth and big relationships, you have to let them learn. And it's painful, but sometimes I say to my teams, if it has to be 100% correct, do it. But what's the benefit of letting them do it 80% correct and growing and learning?
And that's a perfect term, right? About leadership, right? Like, I could be a young person at a department store and been given a leadership role, and they have to follow me because they say so, right? Because the rules say so. But like a true leader, you're kind of saying, is one that allows others to make mistakes, and they build other leaders, right? So like I can't imagine you'd be able to run 25 locations of the party store without other semblance of leaders, right? And then to teach those other leaders how to lead. So yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Although it's easier to say than do. Like, because when I tell my 1 minute story in EOS, my story is I was COO, head buyer, head merchandiser. One day I was unloading a truck, and one of the kids said, "Amy, you'd be a great stock guy." So easier said than done. I was doing everything, but I teach EOS because even though I've been lucky and have been blessed with a lot of success, I made a million mistakes along the way. And every mistake I made, I could have avoided had I had EOS. So delegate and elevate, my friends.
Well, that's a great segue into another question I had. So you went from finance, education and finance, to law, to into the family business, to out of that into a nonprofit, and now we're talking about EOS. So tell us, how did you get started with EOS? Where did the journey with EOS start? And for those that don't know what EOS is, kind of give us a little understanding what that is.
EOS is the Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it helps leaders clarify and achieve their vision, create focus, discipline, and accountability, build healthy teams and cultures, and ultimately grow. And I always used to say, when running a business is a lot of fun till it's not. It's like a complete high in the beginning. And then what happens is your business starts to control you instead of you controlling your business. I didn't know there was another alternative. So I co-founded another nonprofit, and I ran it on EOS. And it was as big as when I found God. Talk about a defining moment. I was like, oh my God, I'm running my business. My business isn't running me. I have to tell everybody about this. So I became...
You're running that EOS life.
Right, exactly. Well, it wasn't the EOS life yet. That comes later. But I said I have to be an EOS implementer, because my real goal is to help people achieve more than they ever thought possible. And this is really a way to help people do that. And as I say, I made so many mistakes. I could have avoided them all if I had EOS. So it's so powerful, and I really get to live my passion every day.
Oh, I love that. I think the one thing that I just heard too that just really impacted me was that, you said your purpose, right? And we all are like, well, what are our core values? How do we operate? And then you said a defining moment of like, what was my purpose? And that is amazing, right? Like, kind of to relate to that, when we started our EOS journey, I always wondered as an entrepreneur, like this was my second business, and it was like, man, like, why do I get upset why am I specifically upset with this employee or person? Like, it's not their fault, but what's upsetting me? And one day I finally wrote down that ended up being our core values. And what it was is that they were infringing on those core values. And that's how it made me feel. But, from a personal standpoint, that that's really impactful too, of where you're saying of like, what is my purpose? Like, what do I really want to be? And I hear a lot of people that I speak to are like, well, my mother, my father wanted me to be this, or I went to school because of this. And you know, how many of them are really trying to figure out what their purpose is? And so that was impactful for me too, because there's always sections of time. You even mentioned that earlier of like, okay, now we're at this part of the pinnacle of the business. Like, do I want to do this anymore? Like, what is my purpose? So thank you for sharing that. It was kind of an aha moment. So I wanted to connect with that.
That's great. I want to clarify how I see that a little, because you said a lot of good things. People who don't share your core values, they're not right people. But when we talk about right seats, right, they have to get, want, and have the capacity to do their job. But really, a person is in the right seat when they're living their passion, their why, and their what. And I believe everyone has a unique purpose. Everyone has something that no one else could give to the world. And sometimes you do outgrow the job, and sometimes the job outgrows you. But for me, like, as you could see from my 7 careers, I figure I have like a 7-year attention span. And then I need the next thing. Like, I love the startup phase. And then, I like to go to the next thing. So I think that you have to figure out, sometimes you do. Your purpose is for one, your purpose may not be forever. It may be something different, but for some people it is. It's complicated. But you have to know who you are. And everybody has such a special soul that they need to shine bright.
I love that. As an EOS implementer, you talked about like the get it and the want it capacity, the core values. When you're teaching the people that you're working with, how do you help them identify finding people that really are appropriate for that seat? How do you coach or train them?
First of all, that's a big thing. I recently became certified in predictive index.
Ooh, okay, I like that.
To use metrics to help figure out what. I think the first thing you have to do is you got to figure out what skill set what behaviors do you really need in this job for right fit. Behavioral interview questions. For right seats, you have to really think about what do you need? Do you need somebody who could do repetitive tasks? Do you need somebody who likes structure? I had a client recently, and the CFO was driving the CEO crazy because he wasn't moving fast enough. So I studied both of their PIs, and I called up the CEO, and I'm like, assuming this person is doing a good job technically, this is exactly what you want in a CFO. They are very slow they don't like a lot of risk. They like the status quo. They want to challenge what you're doing. They go slow. You're being driven crazy because they're not willing to say, go spend $1 million on a dime. And so it's exactly what I'm looking for in a CFO. So in that case, you got to figure out, what do you really need? My best CFOs are risk averse. They're highly accurate. My best salespeople are the opposite of that. They're not risk averse. They have a lot of tenacity. So I think a lot of it is figuring out what's the seat you need, really spending time on what qualities you need, because it's unbelievable if different leaders have different views of what they need.
Yeah.
Really matching. I find the predictive index, it's very spot on. And so I know when I'm working with some people, this person needs a lot. They want to hear exactly how to do the job. Give me a job, just say, go do it. Don't tell me how to do it, because that'll bore me. I need to figure it out myself. So you need to know what you need, and
I love that.
Yeah, it's a great thing.
And when you talk about that, if there's listeners that are sitting in a seat, right, and they're questioning themselves, like, is this really for me? Is that follow the kind of the adverse? Do you find that would be something valuable for them to take to look at an assessment tool like predictive index, or maybe a Colby or something like that? Or do you have other advice for them?
First of all, I think, the more you know about yourself, the better you are. But I would be saying, there's a new book that just came out from EOS. It's the People book. And I would be saying, why am I not happy in this job? Is it because it's too stressful? Is it because I'm bored? I'm not challenged enough? That could be another reason. And then I love the delegate and elevate thing. The delegate and elevate tool. So for those of you who don't know it, you write down everything you do in a month, and then you put it in one of 4 quadrants. Things you love to do and you're great at, which is a great place to be. Things you like to do and you're good at, which is also good. Now there's things you don't like to do and you're good at. That's hell. That's where I pretty much lived my whole career because I was good at it. So nobody wanted me to stop doing it. But it's a complete energy drain. My kids used to call me the bitch CEO. And I still, I think, have that nickname. And the reason is because when you're in a place where your energy is drained all the time, you're not so pleasant. You're not this servant leader that you want to be. So if that's it, get out of those tasks. A lot of times you could give it's just tasks. You could give them to somebody else. Today you could automate them. And then the last quadrant's things you don't like to do and you're not good at, and definitely get out of that. So maybe, so you could be bored, you could be too stressed, you could be living in, things that you're good at and don't like, and you got to talk to your supervisor and find a way to grow. What's your next challenge going to be? Could we get rid of this task that drains my energy?
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. As we talk about kind of the balance between like your clients and your continuous, growth as a leader, how do you do that, right? I mean, you're talking to leadership teams all the time. You're teaching them these skills, and what I know about EOS, right? Like you're their guide, not really telling them what to do, right? So like, how do you continue? Like, how do you balance that?
First of all, EOS is fantastic. They are constantly training us. There's always something they're teaching us. And I realized my soul gets fed on learning. So I'm constantly learning and growing. It's like almost too much. It's like every day I'm doing something new. That's why I have 18 certifications and, it's insane.
Knowledge is power, right?
For me, knowledge is a high. It's not about power. It's not power. It's really about helping people be better.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's not about power. I'm not into the power thing. It's really about how can I help my clients be their best?
I love it. I love it. And you talk about that, like we use the word kind of like empathy sometimes, right? Like, and some people are like, well, I shouldn't be an empathetic leader. And I'm like, why not? Right? Like if you're truly leading who you are and you've built a level of trust with them, right? As Lencioni says, right? We have to start with trust. Talk about empathy. What does that mean for you? What does it mean in your leadership or in servant leadership to you? Does it play a factor?
It's funny because probably it's a developed skill.
Okay.
Because I'm as terrific and kind as I sound, I was a little bit of a dictator, right? Because when you're living in hell, doing things you don't like to do, you're under massive pressure. We had 900 people working for us.
Wow.
It was a very high stress job, especially in the years when we were under financial pressure. So again, easier said than done. I'd love to rewind the clock and redo things, but it really different people require different things. That's one of the reasons I like PI and DISC and all of those things. So some people really do need empathy. They really need you to do it. Some people they want the facts. They don't want empathy. So that's another thing that PI does. It helps you understand what your direct reports need. So empathy is not always my greatest strength. I'm much better with the people who are bottom line and who are giving me the facts. But I have learned because really what motivates me is the cost of turnover is so high, whether just dollars and emotional energy. So I've learned to develop the skill when I need to.
I love that too. And I think we all talk about like there's another tool called Myers-Briggs, right? And I'm thinking while you're talking like, oh wow, like empathy is like the last thing on my list, not because I'm not empathetic, but I make decisions off of data. And sometimes I can come across as less empathetic to those that might have a feeling preference, right? and that think that I'm being harmful to them. And so but what I'm getting from you talking is that as a leader, you're also learning and adapting to the people that you lead. And I think that's really key to teach others, right? I've seen other leaders that start to get into leadership and they're like, I just don't understand. I'm like, well, how are you leading them? Well, exactly like how I'd want to be led. And I'm like, well, how do you know they're all you, right? And so when you start to educate them, if they get it and they want it, and they have the capacity to learn it, they start to learn, oh, I can't say the same thing to everyone in the same exact way. And
it's a very sophisticated level of leadership. And also, I think the direct report needs to understand the leader. So, a lot of my CEOs have a very dominant personality. And sometimes I have to say to them, you say good morning, everyone else hears F you. But if you really know people, if they could understand, I worked with this guy who is very into harmony. It's very important to him. So I am very into the task. Right. And of course, I usually think I'm right. So I am telling him this is what we should do. And because he liked harmony, he would agree with me. And I discovered about 7 years later, he was giving in, not because he agreed with me, but because he cared about the relationship. So we're working on another project together now. And I said, don't you ever do that again. If you're giving in, say to me, I don't agree with you, but I'm giving in. But just so I know, because I always assume in all these years, I just assumed I was so brilliant. But because dominant people have a very strong personality, and you could change all these things. Like as an EOS implementer, I've had to completely tone that down, and that's emotional intelligence.
That's well said. And that's beautiful too, right? So everything we are talking about is emotional intelligence. And sometimes that's really hard. I've spoken to people too that are just like, well, I've been in this role so long, I should just be a leader. And I'm like, well, there's a difference between leading and managing. Why don't we define those? And it's really hard. Sometimes they really don't get it, but they think that they should be in it. And many times I'm saddened to see people that really find themselves in seats because they feel they need to be there, not because it's their God-given talent. Like you mentioned, they're like, well, for 14 years, I've done this. I should be the manager, right? And so you talk about emotional intelligence. Sometimes that requires kind of also some self-awareness too, right?
Yeah. That's what it is. It's all self-awareness. But people think leadership is much better than it actually is.
Some days I'm like, you can have it. You can have it.
Exactly. When I sold my stores, I was like, thank God I don't have to make these hard decisions all day long.
Well, earlier we talked a little bit about kind of like empowerment. You said that you got empowerment, through a lot of the actions and things that you've done. Can you talk to us a little bit about from a servant leader perspective, how you've worked through empowering other leaders or other people in your organization? I think that's something we really could learn from you, especially from 900 people. My Lord, that is a lot of peopling, we call it. So I'm sure you have a lot to share with us.
Well, for me, I really believe it's really the person who led me the best. I think great leaders see the greatness in other people that they don't see in themselves. And when you really believe in somebody and see what they could do, I think it rises them to a different level. So, that's really what I think it is. I think if you believe in somebody and see the good, it enables them to see the good in themselves. People become what you sort of expect them to become. So that is, to me, the single most important thing you do for somebody is really see their greatness. And it's there. But, it's funny. What's the Jewish definition of love? So Judaism, you have a choice. God says, love your neighbor as yourself. So how could God tell you to love somebody? It's a feeling. It's actually not. The Jewish definition of love is choosing to focus on somebody's virtues. So they have both pluses and minuses, and you could focus on either. So as a leader, you need to focus on the great things about people. For sure, you need to tell them where they need to grow. But it's who you see is who they become.
Mm, I love that. And have you experienced in your journey of an owner and a leader and from EOS perspective, how does that apply to like someone that may have what we define as a wrong person, wrong seat as the leader? And say you have somebody that's trying to work themselves up as a high performer, really has a lot of skills and ability, but then you have somebody that is leading them that's not the right person in the right seat. Like, does that diminish that person from growing? Do you see that they leave the organization?
Yeah.
What do you see in that
All
scenario?
of that. The single worst thing you could do to a good employee is put them with a bad employee.
Mm,
And people leave because of their managers. They leave because of job fit. They leave because of the culture. The worst that you as the person in charge, it's your fault if you're not getting rid of that wrong person, wrong seat.
mm,
It's such a disservice. And in today's competitive marketplace, people could find jobs anywhere. And I believe from the bottom of my heart that when somebody's not the right person for their seat, you're doing them a favor by
mhm.
letting them go. I mean, I believe coach them up or coach them out. I don't think
Right.
anyone should be surprised, but you're doing them a favor. You're not doing your good people a favor, and you're not doing that person a favor.
That's well said. And we hear it all the time when we talk to other leaders. Well, but it's painful. I'm a small business. Like it's better than having no one till I can find them. What do you say to those people?
What's the damage? What's the cost of that you're doing? Do you want to lose that good employee? And what, God
Mm,
forbid, if the person died, what would you do tomorrow? Could you survive?
mm, mm,
You'd find a way to survive. But what's the cost of keeping that person? My Achilles heel has always been what we call in EOS wrong people, right seats. So these are
mm.
jerks who are great at their job. The best store manager. They are wreaking havoc in your organization in ways you cannot imagine. And every time you get rid of them, you're like, why didn't I do this sooner? You're constantly dealing with their drama. No one person is as important as everybody else.
Right.
And you gotta make leadership is hard. This is the tough stuff.
It definitely is. You're you're absolutely right there. Well, that kind of leads into another piece. Like, for aspiring leaders or people working on things, obviously, conflict becomes an issue, right? Not an issue, but a learning experience, right? Like, it's one of those things of like, well, if I create conflict, like accountability is conflict. Well, I don't think accountability is conflict, but many times they feel that accountability is really a problem, right? Like I can lead them and I can create tools and manage them, but this accountability thing, if they're the right people, they'll figure it out. You know,
I I
talk to
disagree.
us about that, or the people listening that are trying to figure that out in their head.
First of all, you owe it to people to tell them what they're accountable for. That's your
Mm,
job as a leader. People need to know if they did a good job or they didn't do a good job. It's like basic management 101. And so it's having the right amount of stress. Like imagine you have a rubber band. A rubber band, when there's no stress on it, does nothing. When you give it the right amount of stress, being the accountability, it becomes useful. If you pull it too far, it pops.
mm,
And so it's what's the right amount of stress that you're not making people too crazy. Just for the record, I got that from Alex Freitag in EOS Implementer. He talks a lot about that.
ah,
But you must give people expectations and you must give them dignity. What Pat Lencioni has an amazing podcast on this. I forget something around dignity. I could send you the link afterwards. But you have to let people earn their job. They feel good when they produce, and you have to give them dignity. It's both.
mm,
But that's what leadership is. It's unacceptable to not tell people what's expected of them, what they're
yeah.
accountable for.
That is well said. And I think a lot of times there's also leaders that are like, well, but I can be really positive and encouraging with the feedback, but I really I have a hard time giving them, like I can tell them what's expected, but I really have a hard time like, being direct, right? And they think it's a negative, whereas I think what I'm hearing from you is it's an opportunity, right?
It's
Like,
it's an opportunity and it's your job. I want to know a great team member wants to know how to grow. It's a disservice if you're not telling them where their opportunities for growth are. And it's going to end up being a problem. So I think it's a disservice. I don't want a friend who's telling me I'm great when I am not. That's your job. That is completely your job. And you create artificial harmony. There's going to be passive aggression if you do it. You have to be able to have the tough conversations. Leadership, uncommon courage, uncommon caring, uncommon clarity. It takes courage to tell people this is a growth opportunity for you. Yes. And we're all on a journey to grow. So
we are, aren't we?
What's the big deal? And that's your job as a manager. So like, I'm not feeling any sympathy for this. It's like your job.
Yes. And two, that kind of defines, like, if people are struggling with that, it might not be a seat that's really meant for them. And that's okay, because they have a value to provide somewhere else, but might not be the seat for them. Yeah. I love that.
Develop the skill. Or they could develop the skill of learning how to have these conversations. It's a skill. I grew up with a lot of artificial harmony. I never knew how to have conflict. And Pat Lencioni talks about there's a continuum between artificial harmony on one end and destructive conflict in the middle. And the in-between is constructive conflict. And that's what great teams are doing. You have to always look at conflict. What is it? It's search for truth. Right. All that it is, and you're not putting the problem you're putting between you. It's like in front of you. How are we going to solve this?
Right. And it's just an issue.
It's just an issue. It's just an issue. And what are our options? And we want healthy conflict. If you don't have conflict on your team, something's wrong.
That's right. Yeah, right. What does Patrick say? We probably don't trust each other. So why are we trying to do all this other stuff if we don't trust each other yet?
Exactly.
Oh, I love it. So kind of from what a wonderful journey too, right? And we hear this a lot from really successful entrepreneurs that, and what we hear also too from students that are going to college and getting out of college is they're like, well, I got to choose it right, because it's got to be right going into it. And many times, many of us that have gone through it said, well, this has just been part of our journey, right? And you proved that, right? You've gone through all of these journeys, but you're not doing exactly what you did when you went to school. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And can you kind of give some feedback and encouragement to those that are really beating themselves up to say, well, I went to school for, finance, but I really want to go another path. Like, can you help them and encourage them with some feedback?
Yeah. First of all, that's me. I mean, that's my story. And I think it's crazy that when you're 18 years old, you're supposed to decide what you want to do. I didn't know anything when I was 18. And, those few lucky people who grew up, I want to be a doctor, I'm passionate about that. I don't think that's the majority. And I think life, first of all, life is just a journey. I actually think it's an obstacle course. And everything, you have to be figuring yourself out. You have a lot of clues along the way. But if you made a mistake and you, like me, and I went to law school, should I spend the rest of my life being a lawyer and being miserable? Or should I take a risk with something else? So you just do the best that you can in life. Know that life is a journey designed specifically for your growth and for your soul to shine. And you're always getting clues, but sometimes a clue, if you get fired, I think that's a clue that you're not supposed to be in that job. But life's too short to not do something you love if you could figure out what it is. It just took me forever to figure it out.
Yeah, I hear you. That's great advice. I think, in my journey, many people told me, well, what are you doing that for? You're never going to be successful there. And for me, the naysayers is what motivates me. Not that in the beginning, right? It's like, what do you mean? I'll figure this out. But what I really realized is that many people say, right, like, hang out with people you want to become, right? And I really realized as I moved into my journey, I was with wonderful people, but not people that got me anymore. And I took that in a period of time as a negative, right? Like, well, they don't understand me. But in reality, it was with people that didn't understand me, right? Like EOS was a journey of like, wow, like there is people that think like a visionary in this way. and you aren't nuts, you know? But I say that and amplify that because many people might be sitting there kind of lonely going, you know, am I the only one that acts and behaves this way? And what I realized is you need to put yourself in places that are uncomfortable with other people that challenge you too, which allows you to grow. And it sounds like you've like mastered that, right? Like I can't imagine going through law school and then being like, I'm done. I'm going to do something else. Although all those skills translate probably to what you did, that takes a lot of guts. That's like very impressive.
Believe me, it is very hard to recreate yourself, even though I have done it 17 times, but it is, it's very hard. And at first you have to go down before you go up, but I wouldn't trade the journey. You know, I wasn't happy. It wasn't right. It wasn't my passion. Unfortunately, it took me a long time to figure out what was right. And, you know, Jim, this goes back to something you said in the beginning. Jim Collins says it takes 20 years to become an overnight success. And so I think that's true in life. Like if you look at the people who are successful today, it didn't start out that way. There were a lot of guys who were unloading trucks just like I was. And it's a lot of work. It looks a lot easier when you're on the other side of the journey.
Some days I wish I was unloading the truck, but I know that that wouldn't work out for me. I'd be done after an hour. Well, you've been so wonderful, Amy. You know, as we kind of wind down some of our time together, I'm sure you have a ton of resources. So what could you share with the group, if it's books or podcasts or tools? You know, could you share a few with the listeners?
Well, of course, I love Pat Lencioni, like everybody else. I'm going to give you two Jewish books that I think apply to everybody that are excellent. One is called The Genesis of Leadership. That's where I learned the uncommon courage, uncommon caring, and uncommon clarity.
Okay.
Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who's no longer with us, of blessed memory, wrote a book called Lessons in Leadership. And he takes each week's Torah portion and he pulls out the leadership lesson in there. And I find that to be great. I'm a big fan of the 7 Habits. So those are the books I thought of. You had asked me beforehand.
I love it. I love it.
Probably, but I think those are all great.
And I think you mentioned one too, the New People book. I just finished that from EOS. What a wonderful journey that is, right? If you run EOS and your listeners that run EOS and you're like, just another book, it definitely is worth reading. It kind of brings scenarios together going, all these aha moments of like, am I thinking it? They tell you. So I think it's a great book.
And Traction, of course.
Yeah, that is right.
Gino Wickman has a new book called Shine, which is all about your soul, ironically. It's very much in line with all these things we've been talking about. And I would say that's a great read too.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, Amy, as we wrap it up, any parting comments for the listeners today?
No, none. You know, if you want to find me, amy.holtz@eosworldwide.com, or I'm on LinkedIn. Perfect.
And Amy, are you taking on any new clients for EOS?
I think I have 2 clients graduating.
Okay.
So in the Philadelphia area, but if you want EOS somewhere else, I could help you find someone else.
Perfect. Well, anybody that's looking to work on the EOS journey, look Amy up. She's a great resource. We've learned so much from you today, Amy. You're wonderful. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you all for tuning in to another enlightening episode of Servant Leadership Library. I'm your host, Nicholas Paluco, and today we've had the pleasure of chatting with the unstoppable force of entrepreneurship, Amy Holtz. Thank you, Amy, for sharing your wisdom, your infection, your passion for building businesses and empowering others. Remember, folks, in the world of servant leadership, the journey never ends. It's about constant growth, learning, and lifting others along the way. Until next time, lead with heart, purpose, and a sprinkle of cheekiness. Take care and stay inspired.